Castles for a long time were regarded as being really a functional architecture that was to do with military engineering, unlike churches, which were seen as having ideas behind the way in which they were built. I found quite a lot of literary sources that filled in the missing ideology for castles. For example, I found some sources that suggested that Julius Caesar had built the Tower of London, which of course is not true, but it does show that medieval people thought that castles could be a Roman architecture as old as the Roman Empire. After finishing my research on these buildings, I managed to get a job interview with Usborne Publishing, who do children's books. And at the interview, the manager said, "You've been extremely clever because, as you know, castles are a huge topic in children's publishing." And I said, "Well, actually, I had no idea. It's just lucky for me."
One of the things I learnt on the Masters in Medieval Studies was to question documents in a very specific way, to think about authorship, who wrote them, why were they written, who was going to read them. As a commercial fiction writer now, I think about precisely the same issues. I started writing to fund a return to university, so I was writing romance at the same time that I was studying for a part-time Masters in Medieval Studies. I continued to do a part-time PhD and I continued to write romance. So there were two very different kinds of writing. When I'd finished the PhD, I felt a little bit unbalanced and I started to think about how I could use everything I'd learned about late medieval and early modern York, and I came to this idea of writing a time slip which is set partly in the present and partly in the past. That's what I do now. I continue to write romance, and I'm also working on a scholarly edition of the Ward Moot Court records. The detail in these records allows us a really fascinating glimpse into the everyday concerns of people who lived in York then. That's what I've used to create my own world when it comes to writing fiction, using many of the people I came across in the records.
One of the most useful things I learned while I was at the CMS was the advice they gave me about writing, which was never to use a two-syllable word when a one-syllable word would do, never to use jargon unnecessarily, and always to write as simply as possible so that anyone reading it could understand it, not just someone from my specialist area, and that's been immensely helpful. My current job is in the non-fiction department of Usborne Publishing, where I work as one of a large team of editor-writers, and each one of us is given a number of books to see through from the very first stage of thinking about ideas right the way through to sending it to the printers, and that includes actually writing the book.
At the CMS, I researched the relationship between man and God in medieval churches, and I used 3D modeling techniques to recreate their experience. While learning historic building survey, I realized I needed a tool to help me understand my data, so I taught myself mainstream 3D software packages, and now I use that every day in my career. On graduating CMS, I co-founded a digital heritage company specializing in creating 3D reconstructions of the past.
After my Masters in Medieval Studies, I joined York Minster, where I looked after some of their collections and after a lot of the services, and I rejoined the University of York in the departments of Archaeology and Theatre, Film and Television to do my PhD. I was interested in how early modern performances might have been staged in their original spaces, and I went down with a group of students to Stratford-upon-Avon Guildhall to work and perform an early version of King John by the Queen's Men. We wanted to find a fixed point in time and discover what that space might have looked like in, say, 1590. King John travels to France, to the city of Angers, to demand the allegiance of the citizens. And in the playtext, the citizens are meant to appear on top of the city walls. But in Stratford, there is no wall, there is no gallery which an actor can stand on and look down at the armies of France and of England. So the actor playing the citizen has to be on the same level as the king. And in order for this to make dramatic sense, we have to know that he's protected in some way, so that he doesn't get stabbed in the back. It showed that it was possible to perform these texts under quite Spartan conditions, and allowed us to ask new questions about travelling players in the years before Shakespeare and the Globe. This has allowed me to conduct research for the Globe on the Sam Wanamaker Playhouse, and since I've become a lecturer in theatre at the University of York.
Studying at the CMS sets you up for a portfolio career. As well as being an author, I'm a non-fiction writer, freelance writer. I'm a project editor for illustrated books on historical institutions. I do copy editing, proofreading, teaching, and I review manuscripts.
While I was at the CMS, there was a very good social atmosphere, which often involved me cooking for large groups of people. And I think that experience of cooking in student accommodation with very minimal amount of equipment and quite minimal requirements of ingredients was very useful when I later came to write recipes for children, which have more or less the same kind of constraints.
There was a great atmosphere at the CMS when I was there. It was very congenial, there was lots going on. And I made lots of friends, good friends, and I'm still in contact with many of them. And that, in fact, is how I got the job project managing the illustrated books.
Studying Middle English had an unexpected bonus when I was asked to help with retelling Chaucer's Canterbury Tales for children. In my current job, I work very closely with designers to devise illustrations for the books that I write. And when I do that, I often think back to my days at the CMS when I was working on medieval manuscripts and looking at the way that the illustrations worked together with the text in often quite complex ways that were sometimes complementary and sometimes contradictory.
Now, as an academic, whenever I approach a source, it's with this interdisciplinary toolkit. And that is something which was instilled from the outset doing the Medieval Studies Masters.